I'm going to go and land on the island, if I can. Landed. Now this is interesting. Just here was a turtle nest. And there's a turtle egg shell. So the turtles nested here and hatched all along here, and you can still see eggshells in the water. David Attenborough, eat your heart out. Have you ever heard the phrase, practice makes perfect? Well, I've come to this little island to talk about why practicing anxiety makes you really good at anxiety. But look at this scenery. Isn't this absolutely fantastic? I'm standing here all alone on an island in the middle of Loughborough Lake in Canada. The water's so fresh you could drink it. I swim in it every night. And during the day sometimes when it's really hot. It's lovely and hot. It's June. There's a little bit of a breeze, so you might hear a little bit of wind noise. But how fabulous is this? And look here. This is where my boat is. For the vast majority of things that your brain does, it does brilliantly well on automatic pilot. Automaticity, doing things automatically, is fantastic. And as a general principle, you shouldn't interfere. If you're walking, breathing, eating, even chatting really, you shouldn't interfere with your automatic processes. When I say you, I mean consciousness. So there are two basic bits of your brain, let's say. Conscious, which is the bit that you call you, and all the rest. And all the rest does brilliantly well, and you shouldn't interfere. The role of consciousness, and I was thinking about this as I was driving my little boat, is it's like a light hand on the tiller. My engine, I think there's about 9.5 horsepower. It propels me. It's got way more energy and effort than I have. All I have to do is put a light hand on the tiller. So the role of consciousness, to a large degree, is to set goals and to monitor goals, and to provide a little bit of modification if things aren't going quite right. So practice makes perfect. So if you want to learn something, you set the goal in consciousness. I want to learn to speak Spanish, or I want to learn to play tennis, or I want to learn to whatever. You set the goal, and then you practice it until it becomes automatic. You know, you can hit the ball without thinking about it. If you play any kind of game, the best performance comes from doing it automatically. The poorest performance comes from thinking about it, because consciousness is slow and automatic processes are really, really fast. So, why did you set the goal to make yourself anxious, and then why did you practice being anxious sufficiently to become really good at it? Well, all right, I hear you. You didn't. You did not say, I want to be anxious. I want to be consistently anxious for ages and ages. You didn't do it, and yet you have the outcome of being, let's say, consistently anxious or panicky or OCD or social anxiety. Anything you like, your brain is simply following the goal. But how can this happen? Inadvertently, your brain has caught onto the goal that you want to be anxious, but it's not being modified. your consciousness is not providing a hand on the tiller. It's like letting the unconscious process just do its own thing. And you might say, well, I don't like it. Yeah, but you're not changing it. And how do I know you're not changing it? Because nothing changes, right? If you're watching this video, you're probably struggling with anxiety. Nothing changes. Okay, so because consciousness believes that the anxiety thoughts and sensations are valid, it doesn't play any role in modifying the anxiety. Hence you have the anxiety. Okay. But let's think about this. Does it make sense for you to have the goal of being anxious? It's got no survival value, it's got no social value, it's got no personal value. It's certainly not something that enhances your life experience. And it's probably something that detracts from your life experience. So why would your brain set the goal of being anxious? Here's my hypothesis. Your brain is a thought generation machine. It's constantly creating and generating thoughts. Now, most thoughts are like irrelevant. They're just noise in a sense. So let's imagine that I have the thought, oh, my son is doing really well at school. I feel proud of him. Now, that thought requires no action and therefore is just forgotten. It just goes off with the wind. But suppose I say, I'm going to a party. What if the people there, I don't know people, let's say, what if the people don't like me? Now, that thought is quite a negative personal thought, and therefore it's likely to generate an emotion. And that emotion is likely to be something fear-based, so that thought is going to be attached to some fear. Now, you can't ignore fear because fear is a survival emotion. Ignore fear at your peril. So that thought, what if people don't like me, or what if I don't find anyone to talk to, that kind of negative thought is attached to an emotion of fear. Now what happens is that experience gets recorded. It's in your memory. But suppose you have that thought again because you had it once, and if you have something again, that starts to become a pattern. So now you're starting to have 1 or 2 or 3 thoughts. What if people don't like me, or what if I don't enjoy myself at the party, or what if there's no one to talk to, or what if people don't find me interesting? These kinds of thoughts get attached to fear. And now you have a sequence, a pattern of fear-inducing thoughts. So the next time you have the thought, which is starting to become practiced, you feel fear. Now, there's a thing called cognitive enmeshment. When you have thoughts, which in fairness could be completely random, attached to an emotion, you tend to feel that the thought is valid and true. It tends to seem like the thought is telling you something meaningful. And this is how you become anxious. Random thoughts from your past or really wherever, random thoughts become attached to an emotion. Because you feel something, you think about it, and then you have the thought again. And so you create a sequence of thoughts. And that sequence of thoughts becomes the pattern of anxiety. It becomes, in a sense, the recipe. And you start to believe the thoughts are valid because the emotion makes them feel valid. And because fear is an emotion you can't ignore, the fearful emotion gives them an extra juice. So you might say, I didn't have the goal of being anxious. No, but neither did you have the recognition that just attaching thoughts to emotions can make you anxious. So what you have is like a path, a very, in first instance, quite a gentle path, but then it becomes well trodden, and then it becomes highly practiced, and then you become really good at being anxious without ever realizing that you have been reinforcing the process of anxiety by accepting that random thoughts attached to emotions tell you something meaningful about you, when really they don't. This is my origin story, if you like, about anxiety. It's amazing to see all of the bug holes in these dead trees. Termites, ants, all sorts of things. It's quite different from the experience of being in England. So let's recap. The role of consciousness is to provide a light hand on the tiller so that it can direct your life path. The role of the rest of your brain is to do everything automatically. Systems run automatically, and your brain is fantastically good at that. It's so good that it's now good at making you anxious. Now, you might say, well, I didn't intend to be anxious. No, but you accepted the validity of the connection between a negative thought, a random negative thought, and the feeling. And that enmeshment makes it feel true. So really, the total problem of anxiety is that your brain's made a mistake in giving you these negative thoughts, really, because they're always underwhelming, underplaying, underestimating. So it's giving you these negative thoughts and you're attaching the emotion to it. And the mistake is that your brain thinks it's valid because you're not challenging the negative thoughts and the emotion. You're not challenging the validity of the process. So I guess the solution is that we have to put our hand back on the tiller and we have to steer your life. Most of the people that I meet have accepted that anxiety is something that they don't like, but they've got. And they come to me to help them to learn to not have anxiety. And it works very successfully. Cognitive behavior therapy, online CBT, CCBT as it's called, is extremely effective. Because your brain's willing to learn, it just needs guidance. So if I run my engine and I don't steer, I'm going to go, well, heaven knows where. Probably I'll end up going in circles. And this is true of anxiety. Unless you steer, unless you put a hand on the tiller and direct your consciousness to start to change the process of anxiety, nothing will change. Because why would it? Because if there's no modifying goal, if there's no direction, if there's no force, no pressure to make things different, nothing will change. A lot of people live in hope, hopefully I'll get over the anxiety. Well, why would you? You just wouldn't. Likewise, medications can be useful in managing the symptoms of anxiety, but they're not going to provide the alternative to a hand on the tiller. The hand on the tiller, the goal to not be anxious, and then following through on learning how to not be anxious and practicing it, because practice makes perfect, is the only solution to really getting anxiety out of your life completely. So I hope you find this interesting. It's pleasant to be on the island, and it provides an interesting spot without passers-by just for me to make the video. So I'll see if I can show you some more of the island. Now I'm not sure if you can see those round indentations just there and there. They are egg nests made by bass. So they lay their eggs in that sort of circular patch that they've created, and off they go. Well, I've enjoyed myself on the island. It's been really, really nice. I almost don't want to go home, but I've had to go and have some dinner. Right, so let's untie and see if we can get off without mishap, which should be okay actually. There we are. That is hot. Well, goodbye to the island for another year. I'm going home tomorrow. That's been lovely, absolutely lovely. Early summer weather. Now, this engine has a tiller. All I've got to do is keep a light hand on the tiller, and that provides me with enough steering, right? But look, so the tiller is my consciousness. If I don't steer the consciousness, I start to go around in circles, actually. And I don't really want to go around in circles because it's not very productive. That's basically like anxiety. The same thing, oh, I'm going in a tight circle now. The same thing over and over again and nothing happens. Light touch on the tiller, so consciousness makes a decision and then follows through with that decision, and now we can go in the proper direction. So we need to go a little bit faster. Now that I've got my hand on the tiller and now that I'm starting to manage the anxiety process, I can now start to double down and letting the boat do what it wants to do, because the boat has no clue what it's doing. The system is just doing what it does. It has to be steered. Anxiety has to be steered. Or let's put it this way, your brain, your consciousness has to steer away from anxiety, otherwise nothing changes.